Hey kids, it's Chef Jack. And before I get into it, I want to tell you guys a story. One day a long time ago, when I was about 7 years old, I happened to wander into my grandmother's kitchen. Now, I was the curious kid that always would dig into things. I'd climb into the cabinets and I'd pull things out, and I'd open doors I wasn't supposed to, and I'd look into boxes. You know the type that every adult both loves and hates. Anyway, I'd been told not to play in the kitchen when the grown-ups were there because, something bad would happen. Now, looking back over 40 years, I understand now that basically they were just trying to keep me from being underfoot. But at the time, the warnings they gave me were the type of doom and gloom end of the world scenario that just scared the pants off me. Now, on this day, back when I was about 7, I decided I was finally going to find out what they were talking about when they said cooking. I had no idea. I wasn't allowed in the kitchen while it was going on. So one day, I screwed up my courage and decided to ignore the rule. I poked my nose into the kitchen while my granny was busily going about the task of making dinner for the household, and it was a pretty large household, folks. Anyway, I knew that I wasn't going to get in trouble for it because she wasn't that kind of grandmother. She was the kind of grandmother that encouraged curiosity. So she was cooking. And when I say she was cooking, I mean she was seriously cooking. Looking back over the past 40 years, damn near 45 years now, I can't begin to tell you what she was making. But I do know that she was putting everything into it. She always put everything into it because she loved to cook. So I asked her what she was doing. And she told me she was cooking dinner, which was kind of obvious, I suppose, but, it's the kind of answer you give a 7-year-old. But then she did something that nobody had ever done before. She asked me, "Do you want to watch?" I nodded my head, and she picked me up and sat me on the kitchen counter where I could see everything that was going on. I could see all the vegetables. I could see how she cut them. I could see how she was slicing the meat, how she was working the stove, how she would stir what was in the pot, whatever she checked on the oven. I saw everything. I even took note of things like how she was picking and choosing spices on the rack. She showed me every little step and answered every question I had, and boy howdy did I have a lot of questions. And then she let me help. I mean, sure, all I was really doing was holding the salt and pepper shakers until she asked me for them, but at the time, when I was 7, that was absolutely a vital and essential task. And folks, I was hooked for life. I mean, there's a reason I call myself Chef Jack. Inspired by my grandmother and everything that she showed me and talked to me about back when I was 7, I would become a chef. Folks, food is my passion. Cooking is my art form. I love the precision that you need for it. Everybody thinks, oh, well, just toss it. No, there is a precision to cooking that even the most casual cook doesn't even realize he's doing. I love the thrill of working in restaurant kitchens. I love the stress and the busyness and the challenge. I love how hard a job it is. Working in a restaurant requires more strength and more endurance than anyone would ever believe that they have. It is a tiring, painful, hot, and dangerous job. Too many people watch Giada De Laurentiis and her perfect teeth and her carefully coiffed hair on the Food Network and think, hey, if she can do it, I can do it. But when they finally get into a restaurant, they discover that the work isn't about smiling into a camera, but it's about standing on your feet for 10 hours a day in 200-degree temperatures, working in front of a 500-degree char grill, handling knives, handling fire, and doing it all at a pace that would dazzle an Olympic sprinter. But you know what? It's immensely rewarding. Immensely rewarding. As Tom Hanks' character Jimmy Dugan says in A League of His Own, it's supposed to be hard, because if it isn't hard, everybody would do it. The hard part is what makes it great. It's the kind of work that makes you stand tall when you're through with it at the end of the day. And there's a reason why professional cooks divide the world into 2 categories: kitchen staff and everybody else. Cooking for a living, feeding people for a living is a great thing. And as I said, it's an art form. Cooking for a living is a job that requires an unusually wide skill set. You have to be an artist, you have to be an engineer, you have to be a chemist, you have to be a physicist, you've got to be a public relations manager, you've got to be an administrator, and sometimes you just have to be a dishwasher. It's not something that anybody goes into casually. It's hard physical labor. Even as the leader of a kitchen, you'll work in a cramped space and you'll have to lay your hands on things. Some days, as I said, you'll be in the dish pit. Some days you'll be flipping burgers. Other days you might find yourself cutting vegetables. You'll work in an environment that never cools below 100 degrees during work hours, but has a constant cold draft from the hoods and the vents. You'll put your hands in ice water 1 second and boiling water in another. You'll constantly be breathing in vaporized fat and smoke, and you'll constantly live in vigilance to not get hurt or worse, get killed. It's an emotionally draining job too. You'll deal with anywhere between 3 to 20 staff members, all of whom have needs, all of whom have wants and desires, all of whom have problems. And unlike an office, or even the front of the house where the waitresses live, those problems can't usually wait. You deal with people with bad money management skills, legal troubles, people from all social strata. And you have to make it work and build a team that can operate like a well-oiled machine, because if any piece of that machine breaks down, orders start piling up and the smooth operation of the restaurants just goes away. And that's the last thing you want to have happen when you're trying to make everything work. It's also poison for your social life. Forget about weekends or birthdays or holidays or even weddings or funerals or childbirth, because you're going to be working. Oh yeah, sure, you'll go out and get a drink sometime after work. You're going to get into arguments. You're not going to be able to hang out with your friends, and you're going to wonder where the hell all the time went. But in all that, it is the most amazing job in the world. It's a perfect mix of hard labor and hard thinking. It puts demands on you and it's unforgiving. There are very few awards for second and absolutely no award for third place. There is no fairness in the job, but there's no unfairness either. You either hack it or you go find something else to do for a living. And there are only a few who can actually make it work. Those people are made for it. Those people are the ones with the looks in their eye and the iron will to overcome pain and fatigue, and they are destined to live the best life they can wish for, because no other job comes with so many emotional rewards as cooking. And there's an amazing group of people that will walk through fire for each other, and I am proud to be one of them. So right about now, I figure you're probably asking yourself, when the heck is he going to shut up about cooking in restaurants and start talking about the comic book? So let me go ahead and do that. I want to talk right now about Brave Chef Brianna, a miniseries written by Sam Sykes with art by Selena Ipiridu. Now, we actually originally reviewed this back in one of our independent episodes, and I gave it 5 stars at the time, but to be honest, the series kind of stuck with me. It gnawed at the inside and kind of crawled around in my brain for a while, and I finally decided that I wanted to say a bit more about it than I could with just a 1-minute review and a star rating, even though I did give it 5 stars, which means that I thought it was absolutely amazing. And I did think it was absolutely amazing. But I wanted to talk to you about it with a lot more detail. You see, I've already talked about what it was, what it's like being a chef and the mental attitude you have to have and the physical attitude and how it builds friendships and is one of the hardest and most rewarding jobs ever. Well, this comic book gets it. There are damned few examples in the media of works that actually understand and can present the truth about what it is to work in an industrial kitchen, what it is to work in a restaurant. Mostly when you see chefs in a restaurant, They are over glamorized. You know, they strut around in their white coats with their big hats, and they act like prima donnas, and you don't ever see them working hard. You don't see everybody sweating. You don't see the near panic that a kitchen can get into if things go bad just a moment, and they always do. You don't see this kind of thing. I can, in fact, probably count the examples where you do see it on one hand and have fingers left. I mean, off the top of my head, besides this comic book, there's Ratatouille, the Pixar film, which, despite being about a rat that wants to cook for a living, is really true to life. I mean, everything that gets told to Linguini about how to act in a restaurant kitchen, about keeping his station clear, all that, I have used that very speech to train new cooks. There's Big Night with Tony Shalhoub and Stanley Tucci about a pair of brothers who own a restaurant whose success or failure depends on a single review. That kind of thing actually happens, and you actually worry about how your restaurant is viewed by the critics. There's Burnt with Bradley Cooper, which does a fantastic job of presenting the obsession you can get into, and the attitude, and the way that your food is perceived, and how the attitude toward the food is perceived. And then, of course, there's the appropriately entitled Chef, starring Jon Favreau, which is about the need for creativity and the need for expression in cooking. I mean, seriously, those are it. You just don't see them anywhere else. The official synopsis of Brave Chef Brianna reads, and I quote, "Brianna has big dreams of starting her own restaurant. When her ailing father, a celebrity restaurant magnate, poses a challenge to his only daughter and his 15 sons, she sets out to create the best restaurant around. Thing is, the only city she can afford to set up shop in is Monster City." On the surface, that sounds like nothing more than a light, frothy comedy about a girl who cooks. You know, something aimed toward the kids, or maybe the tween girls who are still swooning over whatever boy band member is currently on the cover of the teen magazines. But this story is actually pretty deep. Its heroine is Brianna Jacobson. She's just graduated from cooking school, and as noted, she is the daughter of a big-name celebrity chef and restaurant mogul. And like a lot of people who grew up around chefs, they want to follow in their dad's footsteps. I mean, one of my kids talked about it at one point. So she's got a head full of big plans, but like most people starting out, she has no idea exactly how to put those plans into motion. And to add to the pressure, her father, who is ailing, like they'd said, has decided that he's really worried about how his legacy is going to continue after he's gone. I mean, he's proud of being a big-name celebrity chef. He's proud of being influential, and he doesn't want his kids to ruin his reputation after he's gone. So he's decided to pit Brianna and her 15 brothers against each other in a competition to see who can create the most successfully run restaurant. The winner inherits the keys to the kingdom, as it were. But Brianna, having just left school, you know, her dad doesn't give her any money to start a restaurant, not very much, just, you know, whatever she's managed to save. And so she doesn't have a lot of options, which is why she moves to the appropriately named Monster City. They call Monster City that because that's where the monsters live. And when there, she opens up a restaurant that serves human food, which Brianna doesn't know is illegal in Monster City. And thus we have the story. Now, the art in this book is fun. It's cartoony. The characters are quirky. It all fits well together. There's, you know, the monsters bring in a touch of fantasy about it. So I think on one point it is being aimed at the younger crowd. But there's a lot here that the older hardcore comic readers, the serious comic readers who want to read about serious subjects, they can get into this just as much as the kids can. But of course, they probably passed on the title because they look at it and they go, it's, you know, it's about a girl who cooks. Big deal. Yeah, actually, it is a big deal. Let me tell you, folks, not taking this serious would be a huge mistake. Underneath the frothy, light, carefree surface of the story is a very reflective and, as I said, deep and multi-layered story that deserves all of our attention. Now, on one hand, there's the story of Brianna, the chef. Every chef who has ever tried to open their own place goes in with one fact bouncing around in their brain. And that fact is, over 85% of all new restaurants that open will be forced to close within 5 years due to money troubles. It's just a fact of the business. Even the big-name chefs have had some absolutely amazing flameouts because of this. But when you're new and you don't have a lot of backing, it's all the more likely. And I have to admit that this part hooked me, because I have been there. You are just out of cooking school. You're thinking, hey, I'm a chef now. The truth is, to the real chefs, you are nothing but a wet behind-the-ears punk who doesn't know a damn thing about how the real culinary world works and is about to find out pretty effing quick that your cooking school education means two things: diddly and squat. Because if you don't figure it out fast, all you're going to be is a speed bump on some restaurant's smooth operation. The other great thing about this is the story of Brianna the person. Anyone who has ever struggled with anxiety problems or family problems or money problems, not to mention anyone who's ever dealt with bigotry or discrimination, can identify with Brianna and her fight to keep herself and her restaurant going. In the end, the greatest struggle she faces is all about learning how to go on under circumstances that are just absolutely so difficult that nobody would blame her if she would quit. It comes as a shock. It really does, realizing that despite how hard you knew it was going to be going in, it's just that much harder in the real world. And I'll be honest, the veterans who've already made their place in the culinary world, they will give you precisely no sympathy at all if it turns out that you can't hack it. Oh, sure, they'll empathize. They'll, give you the usual, well, you tried kind of speeches. But then they'll shrug and go right back to their own jobs. Professional cooking's like a freight train. It's huge and it's intense and it never stops. And if you can't get with it, if you can't keep up, you get pulled under the wheels and are crushed. The ones who make it might spare a thought about how it's, too bad that you couldn't hack it, but it's just as likely that when you're gone, they'll start telling jokes about you. So that's what Brianna faces, and when she comes out the other side triumphant, there's an uplifting feeling, because she's made it. She's paid her dues, and no amount of hardship when it comes to restaurant work will ever faze her again, because she's already been through the fire. She has already got to a point where she knows how much she can take. She knows how much she's worth. She has endured it. She doesn't quit when she has the opportunity to, and she figures out what it is that she wants. She finds the difference between the personal definition of success and the definition of success that other people want to impose on her. And by figuring that out, as long as Brianna is happy with her own work, then nobody else's judgment matters, and she wins. And that is a very powerful message, folks. A very powerful message. And it's something that a lot more people need to learn. Speaking of messages, there's another one, delivered at the last minute in the final issue by one of Brianna's friends, that really needs to be talked about. That message is this: discrimination should never, ever be tolerated. Ever. No exceptions. It doesn't matter who is being discriminated against or who is doing the discrimination. It doesn't matter. It should never, ever be tolerated. You see, the primary antagonist in this story, the monstrously serpentine chef Madame Cron, is portrayed very clearly and very obviously as a bigot who despises Brianna, not because of anything Brianna has said or anything that she's done, but simply because Brianna is a human being and not a monster. Cron hates human beings, and she does so because for centuries humans have hunted and slaughtered and oppressed the monsters. So she sees it only as right for Brianna to be bullied and excluded and treated with less respect and dignity than anyone else, because after all, according to her, humans deserve it. Not that anything has ever directly been done to Madame Cron, and not that Brianna, of all people, has ever said an unkind word to her. Brianna's always been kind and courteous to everyone, but that's Cron's justification. And it's presented in a very interesting manner, and that manner is that basically you can't be racist against humans because racism requires power. Not just prejudice, but power. And in this world, the humans have it and the monsters don't. Does that sound familiar? It should. But this idea that it's okay to discriminate against some people because for too long the group that those people belong to were the traditional oppressors and not the oppressed, it gets utterly trashed in the final book of this series. It is pointed out, effectively and finally, that racism is racism is racism, and it doesn't matter what the color of the victim of the racism is, because it's still just racism. This is a solid and important message that too damn many people these days need to learn. And boy howdy, I wish they could all read this comic. But back to the book. While I was putting together the notes for this video, I kept looking for something negative to say about this entire series, just to balance out all the gushing that I knew that I was going to be doing. Honestly, the only problem I can think of with this series is that I wanted it to last longer. I don't necessarily mean turn it into an ongoing series, but I wanted it to be more than just 4 issues. If Sam Sykes had had just a little bit more breathing room to develop the characters a little more fully, and maybe make the plot just a little more deeper, it would have been that much more perfect. And this story does have the legs for that kind of development. I found myself wondering about the backgrounds of some of the characters. I mean, precisely what happened to Madame Cron, for example, to make her such a bigot? Why is Susie the waitress, who works at Brianna's restaurant, so insecure about herself when she is so strong and confident when dealing with other people? And what about the other 14 brothers? They don't appear in the series at all. Only one of Brianna's brothers shows up. So what are they doing? They're still in the competition for their father's legacy. So what's going on with them? There is, however, all of these things do form a nice array of plot hooks that could have been placed for sequel series. Maybe Sam Sykes has more planned for this later on that he intends to do another series. Personally, I hope he does decide this because I'm already at the can't wait to read more stage. All that criticism aside, I cannot complain about where the story ends, or in fact how it ends. And to be honest, I think this series is a little bit of a masterpiece. Oh, and one final note. Each issue of Brave Chef Brianna ends with a professional level recipe created by Chef Stephanie Goldfarb, who I can personally attest makes some amazing eats. Guys, if you are ever near her place in Chicago, take the time to try her out. It's a little pricey, I have to admit, but the food is just amazing. It's worth it, trust me. So have you read Brave Chef Brianna? If you did, what did you think about it? If you didn't, do you think you might want to now? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you like this video and you want to see more, click like or click share. If you haven't already done so, click subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. We also have a Patreon page. The link's in the description below. If you'd like to help us out or are interested in exclusive content, feel free to wander over and drop $1 or $2 in the till. Even if you don't, Thank you very, very much for watching.
Focus on the pleasure, something I can treasure. Can you picture that? Can you picture that?